Hey, everybody, it is Darrell with the weekly Back 40 broadcast, supporting you to create your second half of life as your best half of life. I'm going to jump right into it today because there's some cool things I want to talk about. By the way, before you leave, though, make sure you grab your top 10 tips for a radical second half below. What I want to talk about today that I think is so applicable for the Back 40. And the Back 40, basically, if you're joining us for the first time, it's really about creating your second half of life as your best half of life. We have the motto, the mantra here, that you have yet to do what you came here to do. And that's saying a lot because there's a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s who've done a lot of awesome things. There's a lot of people in our community who've done a lot of awesome things. And we hold, and they are empowered also to the idea that you have yet to do what you came here to do. And so the topic today is about leveling up. And I've actually got 3 tips for what I call inconvenient leveling up. So I attended a 4-day program over the last weekend. It was a 4-day high performance training. And I was really inspired. Wonderful leader. It's interesting, 15 years younger than me. And I've done a lot of personal development, right? And, there was this first little tinge like, wow, he's saying, and this is somebody I, could really trust. I've done tons of personal development programs, over my lifetime. And, there's some that you take what they have to offer. You don't know, how much you could, really trust them if it came down to it. And again, that's all judgment and whatever. But the point is that, really trusted this guy. And, there's this tinge that it's like, oh, wow, how come I didn't know that yet? And I think, and I suspect, because I see it in a lot of the people I work with, and I see it in a lot of just certain individuals that in my life that it's kind of like if you can, admit that you don't know something yet, especially when you get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's like to be able to admit that, wow, that I'm not aware of that. Because I think there's this tendency as we move into our second half to already have amassed a lot of wisdom. We've got all the wisdom that we've learned about life and who we are and the way the world works. And, hey, I just demonstrated it, what we can trust and what we can't trust, right? And if we have yet to do what we came here to do, then that means there's going to be new information. There's going to be new strategies, new techniques, new ways that we're going to need to operate and be open to operating so as to actually do what we came here to do. So this idea of kind of looking at least the culture I grew up in, that basically said that, you go out there, you work really, really hard and you make it. And then when you've made it, you kind of, rest on that or enjoy that and be comfortable in that and, look at retirement. I'm not knocking retirement, and I'm also not knocking having made it, okay? And what might be possible beyond that? And there's a lot of folks, as a matter of fact, this whole Back 40 movement was kind of created for those who maybe at midlife haven't even felt like they, quote, really made it. And there's a lot of hope in the idea that you have yet to do what you came here to do. And yet there's a lot of hope in the idea that you have yet to do what you came here to do, even if you have, quote, made it. What's the next level of contribution? What's the next thing? And so the idea here today that I just wanted to bring up is this whole idea of leveling up and how inconvenient it can be. And, I was watching as this trainer described how, he works with people and they, people who've had huge successes and they get to a certain level and there's a lot of success and there's, a lot of the toys and everything to back up that success. And yet they think that their next breakthrough is going to come at that same level. They think that it's, can happen there, as opposed to, look at 20-year-olds. Okay, 20-year-olds go out into the world and they are just taking in information to learn about themselves and find, their direction and what their passions are and things like that. And, they're sweating it, and, they're operating in a lot of unknown to, excuse me, move up, right? And so a lot of these people who've made it kind of plateau out, and they're not willing to take on the inconvenience of sweating some more, of opening themselves up to things they don't know yet, and of really stretching themselves and operating in realms outside of their certainty. So the idea here today is, let's look. I'm looking for myself. Look, I was in a 4-day personal development program. I've probably done most of them under the planet or on the planet. And yet at the same time, I'm not a picture perfect, example of leveling up, unless I remember that I've got to continue to level up. I have to take on new technologies. 5 months ago, I didn't know what YouTube Live was. I wasn't doing Facebook Live videos. I wasn't using new beta test technologies, right? And yet, because I know that I have yet to do what I came here to do, and that there's a message still to deliver, I am exposing myself and listening and experimenting. And that's one of the biggest things I think for us in the second half to get over, is this idea that we're going to make a mistake, not look good, and whatever. When the 20-year-olds go out and they're learning things, they're not worried about making a mistake and everything, because they don't know anything yet. And I think to the degree that we can allow ourselves to not know outside of our amassed wisdom, there's so much more contribution for us to make. You have yet to do what you came here to do. Here's a few tips for inconvenient leveling up. Number one, expose yourself. Yeah, not that way. Expose yourself to new ideas. The tendency for a lot of people as they get into their second half is to stay around the same folks, to stay around the same communities. I'm not saying the communities and the grooves that you've gotten yourself in aren't great and valuable, and yet a groove can become a rut. And so starting to expose ourselves to new thoughts, new communities, new ideas. There's a whole lot of attachment we get as we get into the second half to, stay where it's safe and comfortable. And you just don't know that as you get out there and find some new communities, find some new ideas, some new exposure to new things, that there may be something there, just like a 20-year-old who hears something and they get inspired, like, oh, wow, this is really something for me. You don't know that wouldn't happen for you. So one thing for us to do, I think, in the second half is to get more exposure. There's this term that was called groupthink years ago, and it was basically about when you have a group that's all thinking the same way and they're all acting the same way, and then there's no new ideas that can come in. So getting out and exposing yourself, getting outside the groupthink. Number two, listen. Can you see that? It's kind of like, doesn't show up too well, right? But it says listen. So being willing to really listen. A lot of times, especially in the second half, for those of us who've been around and know the way it is and know how women are and know how men are and know how life is, there's this idea to filter everything, through the macerator, or through the slice and dice mechanism of, do I believe that? Is that true? And we evaluate everything. And, by killing off all new ideas, we end up in the same old groupthink. So listening as opposed to hearing, hearing you can hear, but to listen and to really step outside of the all-knowing garbage disposal that's going to, put everything, away really quick. And, I think a lot of times too, that I see in the second half is that when new ideas come in to those who've been around a while, there might be this inner defensiveness even that, even like I shared, during the weekend, it's like, well, wow, shouldn't I know that by now? And almost because of the defensiveness, almost because we don't want to admit at our ripe age that we don't know it all, or that there may be some ideas and things, that could be more effective than what we're doing. It's like almost, our ego doesn't want to admit that it doesn't know. And we don't want to say, oh, well, I should have known that by now, or the ego wants to defend itself. And so basically it chops everything up and says it dismisses it. So again, listen, be willing to listen. And then thirdly, experiment. Just try some new things. Get in environments, expose yourself, whether it's courses, classes, programs, people, communities, the world, travel, go to the furthest country you could ever imagine yourself going to, and learn to relate or learn to see that, wow, we're all humans and we're kind of all the same. And, get outside the, ethnocentricity of our own worlds, and really get out there and be willing to experiment and try new things. Look, you've made it, this far in your life. Nothing's going to kill you. All right. And you've got your set grooves. Be willing maybe to take on, pulling yourself out of the set groove and walking on some flat land again, and starting to try new ideas, try new things. It's not going to kill you. You might, by the way, prove to yourself that your wisdom is correct. And you probably will if you go into an experiment to prove that your wisdom is correct. So again, there's a whole mindset shift here about the inconvenience of letting go of what we already know so as to level up to be who we came here to be and do what we came here to do. I hope this has been helpful for you. Be sure to grab your top 10 tips for a radical second half below. And we look forward to seeing you next week on the Back 40 broadcast.